Good afternoon. This is the Opa-locka CRA meeting. Today is February the 17th. The time is 5:05, I believe it is. And we're calling the meeting to order. But I know it's not a meeting, it's a workshop. It's a workshop. So I'm going to turn it over to our director, Mr. Gay, for you to carry out the workshop. And good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Madam Chair Russell. My name is Gregory Gay. I am the CRA manager for the Opa-locka Community Redevelopment Agency. And this is a workshop to familiarize the board members as well as the community on some of the activities that are going on within the CRA. Our primary activity of discussion for this particular workshop is the downtown master plan. This is a master plan that was pointed out within our redevelopment plan that was done in 2011. And we are looking at updating this particular master plan or bringing this particular master plan to light. Approximately 5 years ago, there was a downtown concept plan that was developed for the city of Opa-locka, which looked at some ideals and some concepts as to how the downtown area could potentially thrive as a independently zoned area of the city of Opa-locka.
Mr. Gay,
Yes,
can I read the script before we proceed?
yes, you can.
Okay. Pursuant to Resolution 21-9835 passed by the City Commission on November 12th, 2020, the City of Opa-locka may conduct public workshop meetings without a quorum of its members presently physically or at any specific location and utilizing communications media technologies such as telephonic or video conferencing as provided by Section 120.545B2 of the Florida statutes. The members of this meeting have been announced by roll call. We'll do that in a second. An opportunity was given to the public to address the City Community Redevelopment Agency Board by sending an email to the CRA clerk at crapubliccomments@opalockafl.gov. The clerk will announce all public comments at the appropriate time.
Thank you, Madam Attorney. With that being said, we will have Ms. Hall introduce the board members that are present.
Okay. Board Member Chris Davis.
Present.
Board Member Paget.
I am here.
Okay. Board Member Taylor.
Present.
Board Member Williams.
Good afternoon, I'm here.
Okay. Board Member Titus
Present.
and Chair Russell.
I'm here. Thank you.
Okay.
We
Attendance confirmed.
apologize for not following protocol, Madam Attorney.
No worries, I got y'all.
Thank you.
All right, thank you and welcome to everyone. As I was stating previously, the purpose of this meeting is to discuss the steps being taken as relates to the downtown master plan. This is a master plan that was identified through the redevelopment program that was developed in 2011, 2012. What I would do now is have Mr. Corian Delane, who is the project manager, introduce the team that was selected to do the downtown master plan. The team is called Stantec, and they were selected through a RFQ process for this particular activity. And Mr. Delane, who is our city planner, will be introducing the team.
Good evening, everyone. Corian Delane, city planner, CRA planner. The downtown master plan was, as Mr. Gay stated, an initiative of the CRA in order to facilitate new activity in our downtown. We facilitated a RFQ process, and Stantec is the firm that was selected. We've been working with Stantec for the past 4 months now, and today they want to basically discuss their initial phases of their master plan. So with that, I want to introduce both Jarrett Beck and David Dixon And I believe with them as well is Mr. James Karras, who will be doing their presentation of the downtown master plan studies as they are right now. If Nelson could bring them in.
Good afternoon. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Corian, do you want us to take it from here, or do you have anything else you'd like to add in?
Pretty much stays, the floor is yours.
All right. Well, good evening, everyone. It's good to see you again. I think most of us have talked back in November, December, and as Corian mentioned, I'm joined today by David Dixon, who is the principal in charge of this project. He's also vice president with Stantec and has had the opportunity to work with many communities around the country to realize their revitalization goals. And also Jim Karras, and Jim is got a long history in redevelopment work. He's also the one that has been leading the market analysis, which is one of the critical parts of this overall project. So what I'd like to do is I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you and give a little bit more of an introduction on what we're doing, kind of outline the presentation or the working session for tonight, and then we'll move into some of the discussion. Let me go ahead and do a share right now, and I think this should work well. Let me know, do you all see a presentation on your screen?
Yes, we do.
Okay, perfect. I feel like a winner already. So tonight is going to be fairly high level. There's a lot of detail that has gone into what we're going to speak to tonight. But one of the things that, excuse me, is really important for us when we develop this plan is that the end result will be a plan that genuinely can be realized. It is one that is going to be grounded in market realities and things that the city of Opa-locka can reasonably expect to achieve. And so while we want to have a very bright picture of the future, it's also one that's grounded in reality. And our goal in tonight's workshop is to really help establish sort of a baseline of the data that we've been developed so that you can understand sort of where we're at and what we found in terms of the market data, the existing land uses and opportunities, and that as this being the first of multiple workshops we hope to have with you all, we will go through this process now together in developing ultimately what the final plan will be and what the various action and implementation steps will be. Because once we're done with this, it is going to rest on you as the CRA board, as the city council and the staff to make this plan happen. So tonight we're going to cover a few different areas. Oops, and let me. We'll talk a little bit, just a quick recap on the overall master plan area that we are studying, some of the vision elements that you told us during our previous discussions and foundational trends that are occurring around the country. We'll talk briefly on some of the disruptors that are guiding change and redevelopment. We'll look at some of the early areas identified as opportunities for change within the downtown master plan. Then we'll move into the market analysis and what can be expected reasonably in the next 3 and 6 years as we look towards implementing the master plan. And then we'll have some general dialogue on how we get there and what some of the next steps are going to be. So if I haven't said this before, I am a very casual presenter. So if there's at any point you want to jump in or have a question that you don't want to wait for, please feel free to go ahead and do so. And with that, we'll go ahead and get going. As a reminder, the downtown master plan area that we're studying is largely bounded on the southern side of Opa-locka Boulevard, or I'm sorry, of Alibaba by the railroad tracks. And then we are on the western edge by Northwest 37th, on the eastern edge by Northwest 27th. We'll look on the northeast by Sherazade, and then we'll loop up to pick up the City Hall property and then sort of make our way back towards 37th, encompassing the barracks property, excuse me, and some of the industrial sites. When we had the opportunity to speak with several of you back in November, December, we had some fairly informal conversations that touched on a couple of similar elements through each one of you. We talked about what your vision was, or asked you really what your vision was, in some cases what some of your challenges were and opportunities, and your general thoughts that came out of those discussions. And one of the things we found afterwards, as we were looking at all of our notes and everything you said, is that you all had some real similarities that came through in terms of what you wanted to see for downtown Opa-locka. Everyone wanted to see a vibrant and active downtown, which is fairly expected, right? No one says, well, we want to do a downtown with nothing, but that was a key element that you wanted. And one of the things that really stood out to me is that each one of you identified the importance of having locally owned small businesses. And as I've shared with others throughout this process, oftentimes when I work in other communities, we hear people say, well, we want what this community has. We want what this community has, or that community, or this store, or that store. And I was really pleased to hear that all of you stress the importance of really having that growth of local entrepreneurs, expanding what already exists in Opa-locka. So that was really a fantastic thing. And we're going to talk more on that as we go through this master plan process quite a bit. You also all spoke on authenticity and really maintaining a unique characteristic of Opa-locka, what's already there, and in moving forward, keeping a level of authenticity and not having that trying to match what other communities have done. And then one of the other last elements that you all brought up in various parts of our conversation has been the value in diversity and what you see that role plays within the city of Opa-locka. And so we're really excited that while those are just a couple of the characteristics you all brought out, there were ones that each one of you touched on. And what David's going to talk on a little bit is how trends are reshaping revitalization around the country, and how these very values that you all identified really fit nicely into what we're seeing elsewhere.
Thank you, Jared. And David's going to make a quick confession. He thought this meeting started later than this and just saw the emails that came in. So I apologize for appearing last minute. It's a real pleasure to be able to talk to all of you, and very much look forward to your questions. I think Jared and I and Jim are going to speak in headlines, so with partly to respect your time. So please ask, and you know what, ask. You don't have to wait till we're done. If you have a question, just jump in with it, please. But I want to start with the sort of foundational trends that are really essential to creating competitive places that are competitive in the marketplace for housing, for jobs, but also that are more successful socially, creating a sense of community in our increasingly diverse communities. Everything, just about everything one tries to these days comes down to walkable, back to walkable, places that encourage people to walk. Walkability is far more than trees, even shade on a hot Florida day, or a nice sidewalk. It's about places to walk to, destinations, a cool coffee shop, place to grab a beer, a retailer that you like going to, some arts or culture. Just these do not support themselves. They're supported by having enough business. And that brings us, when we start talking about walkability, the foundation we need is, I'm going to use a word that some people don't like, but we can make it lovable, I promise, is density. Enough, particularly housing nearby, to support businesses that then bring folks out walking and then running into each other, having conversations. If you want to have a wonderful square or small park with people in it, you need people walking by, and you need the density that brings it to life. So when we talk about walkability as a foundational issue, we have to make it real. It's not just a notion. With the right kind of density and the right kind of design, attracting the right kinds of businesses that really speak to your community and draw them. Connected is about making sure that we have an inviting place to walk around, that we really understand the role that Tri-Rail can play in linking and connecting your community to larger sort of South Florida, Miami-Dade community in terms of jobs and all kinds of education and all the other things that are important to folks' lives. A multi-layered public realm is one. By public realm, I mean the parks, the sidewalks, all the public places where people gather that include a range of opportunities, some that invite two people just to sit and have a quiet conversation, others someplace downtown if we can make it work, where the Opa-locka community can come together to celebrate. And maybe that's, you know, closing Opa-locka, closing the street for festivals, because that can be a great public street. It's about inclusive, and inclusive is not welcoming everybody. That's part of inclusive. Inclusive requires going a step further, which means actively inviting everybody to use spaces together. People who come from very different cultural backgrounds, very different ages, very different interests and aspirations, all have to find what they want. So a park that is a place where kids can play football, other kids can play in a spray fountain, older folks like me can sit and watch everybody, a place where neighborhoods can come and have their potluck suppers all together. That's what makes an inclusive public place and public realm. And then authentic. And authentic, you have amazing authenticity in the architecture, that the wonderful heritage that you own. But authenticity is also about giving the current living culture of Opa-locka a face downtown, and really making it part of new developments, so that they really express the spirit of the community today. And all of this builds on, I'll try to be a little faster here, builds on major trends that are really changing the opportunities communities like Opa-locka have. And it starts with demographic shifts. So for most of the years since World War II, households with kids dominated our housing markets. They wanted to go to suburbs. They cared about schools, which we should all care about, et cetera. But in the last maybe 10 years and for the next 20, the large majority of net new households, that's growth in the housing market, are going to be singles and couples without kids. I have kids and grandkids. This isn't an anti-kid statement, but it is the reality of the housing market. And while some folks have said, well, gee, COVID showed us that a lot of people want to leave cities. In fact, if you look at the data nationally, people have not been leaving cities. They have been moving into cities and suburbs at the same rate they were before COVID. Going forward, we have the most urban market we will have ever had in the US. The most folks, because most new folks entering the housing market are singles and couples without kids, that we've ever had. This is a tremendous opportunity for Opa-locka that it hasn't had, a market foundation that many communities have not had, that they will have for the next 20 years. If we can bring the kind of amenity, walkability, the things we were just talking about that make this a place people want to choose. Changing economy, growth in our economy, and that growth translates into growth in our tax bases, et cetera, have to do with attracting knowledge industry jobs and the jobs that they attract. And that means a great place that people want to live and work, places to hang out, the same kinds of things that make it a great place to live. And finally, we are beyond the cusp of, we're just moving into a period of dramatic changes in how we move around. So I know a lot of people may think, oh, autonomous mobility, meaning cars that drive themselves, are way off in the future. They actually aren't. Our dear company, Jared's and mine, has a very active practice in this area, says that in 25 years, this will be the dominant mode of moving around. We won't drive ourselves, our cars will drive us. On the way there, we will first still drive our cars, but they'll be so connected to each other that they can drive 6 inches apart. We won't need the same lanes. And this is maybe in the next 15 years. They'll park much more closely. So that means we can add, we don't have to pay for as much parking when we do development, which means when we want to do denser development in the heart of Opa-locka, we don't have to build all the expensive parking that we do today, which actually means today we want to avoid building everywhere we can, because we're not going to need it for 30 years. We'll need it for maybe 12 to 15 years. So these changes are coming at us. And again, these can really be supportive of a really vibrant and just wonderful heart of downtown. That's the heart of the Opa-locka community. Next, please. And these trends are all happening everywhere, including in South Florida. You've been lucky to grow. The nature of that growth is probably going to change in 2020 through 2040. Climate change, what I haven't mentioned, is clearly an issue that I think you probably know a lot about. One of the things that has really struck us, and I'll be very direct here to honor everybody, we live in a period today that is far more aware of issues of racial equity and justice than we did even a couple of years ago, and at a deeper level of awareness and political commitment, which means that to an extent that if you put economic trends together, more and more folks looking for more urban walkable places to live, the need for affordability as Miami grows, and Fort Lauderdale and West Palm Beach to be very, very expensive places, and the sort of political impetus that a shared search for racial equity brings, that in many ways Opa-locka, to an extent that it hasn't had the ability to be before, is in the right place at the right time with the right policies going forward, as it thinks about its downtown. This is a great time to be doing this planning. Next, please.
All right. So I think what we're going to do is David's given a really good intro in kind of some of that element. And we're going to start to take a look, though, more at specifically the downtown, the area, what we have, and knowing that you have a vision. There are trends both nationally as well as regionally that are going to support some of the growth in the redevelopment. We want to see where that can happen and what exists within downtown. The area, you all know and are very familiar with, there are some challenges in terms of that shorter term redevelopment window, meaning less than 10 years. Where can we realistically see redevelopment to occur? And in large part, what I say in terms of redevelopment, and I'm pulling right off of what David said, we're going to focus a lot today on housing. Housing will be what drives the business. Housing will be what drives and supports the quaint coffee shops and the restaurants and the retail and the activation that all of you have talked about, you see as a part of the vision. Now, a couple of the challenges in the downtown area are that simply we have a good amount of government ownership along Opa-locka Boulevard. We've got a mix of many different ownerships of industrial property along Alibaba. We have the school district that owns quite a good amount of property on the eastern side of the downtown area. And then there are an awful lot of small single-family residential lots throughout there. Now, one of the other areas, though, that you've probably seen as a challenge in the past that we think is really a terrific opportunity and probably one of the best assets of downtown is the private ownership of the barracks property, as well as some of the industrial property on the far western end. So we have gone through all property ownership data for all of the owners that have everything within the downtown area. We have talked and worked with your staff who have had communication with different property owners, including investors over the last number of years. We've had the opportunity to speak with the CDC and others and really start to see where can this development occur. One of the best things about the barracks site is that they are all owned by investors. And it's our understanding that there is, or has been at least in the past, an interest expressed in potential redevelopment on their part or working with the city. We also know a couple of these redevelopment or a couple of the industrial parcels, on the northeast and southeast of Opa-locka Boulevard and 37th are also for sale. So in this whole western area, there's more than 30 acres that could potentially be redeveloped in the shorter term. And what's great about that is that that size, that acreage, that is enough to create a downtown neighborhood. That is enough to create enough density within that area that starts to support some of the vision of what you have, the restaurants and the retail and the shops. It's enough area to bring that concentration of people in to really help activate downtown. So we're going to take that one step further, and we're going to reimagine what the barracks site could be if it were broken into more urban city blocks. And then we're also going to add in the darker blue boxes, other privately held properties that are currently vacant. So what that means is they're dirt. If those property owners at any point chose to redevelop, it's already empty, there's nothing there. So we start to pick up a little bit more that's occurring along Alibaba. And then of course, we still will keep our anchor on the western side of downtown. So we'll take that one step further and we're going to look at other potential redevelopment properties. So this incorporates a couple things. The first one being the sort of orange color, which represents CDC property or CDC ownership or future projects. We have the purple color, which reflects city-owned property, which you control. Then we're going to add in a light blue, which is the state-owned parking lot. Now, we recognize that short term, there's perhaps some challenges in working with the state on what that property could become, but longer term, that has to be addressed. We've got to figure out a way to get around that. It's too important of a piece of property on one of really your main streets to just allow that to sit. That is also the parking lot block, if I didn't mention that. So nothing but pavement, and I'm sure you all go by it all the time. There's never any cars there, so it just sits there. And then we have the other pink properties, which represent individual parcels that are entirely parking lots. So we have gone ahead and included the tri-rail parking lot in here. That could be reconfigured in the future. There could be some other way in which that's used. But when we start to look at all of the properties then that are either investor owned that we know may have some likely redevelopment opportunity in the shorter term, properties that are completely vacant, meaning they're dirt and there's nothing, or they're simply parking lots, we start to see where there's really a great opportunity for that future shorter term redevelopment in downtown Opa-locka. So what we're going to do now is sort of shift this and talk and actually have David talk a little bit on how this all can start to come together as we further develop the downtown plan.
Okay, thanks, Jared. And I'm going to telegraph ahead that Jim is going to talk about housing market demand, which is, again, the most sort of tangible demand we can think about. And I'm not going to steal his thunder, but I will say his analysis shows it's significant enough that we can really, it's really worth taking a serious look at these various opportunities for redevelopment. You know, they're not all going to happen certainly in the first 5 years, maybe not first 10 years, but over 20 years, it's not inconceivable that most of this could have changed with the right policies in place. But what is this? One of the first messages is if you look at these, at the barracks and at the wonderful new streets that Jared has drawn through there, so they become neighborhood blocks, this is a whole new downtown neighborhood. This is a chance to define a character that is shares in downtown. These folks would all walk downtown to shop on Opa-locka Boulevard, but maybe also along portions of this blue route here. And I unfortunately forgot the name of that street, so we shouldn't have covered it over. What's that?
Fisherman.
Yes, thank you. So it begins to sort of suggest, as we think about where redevelopment, potential redevelopment is concentrated, where the change is concentrated, and where the heart, which is along this blue route, and the heart of Opa-locka, traditionally Opa-locka Boulevard, they set up a really sort of interesting crossroads to help us begin to think about how we might envision where to prioritize, where to incentivize new development, to really get, I hate this term, but it conveys the message, a bang for your buck. Okay, next, please.
I see that Board Member Paget has his hand up.
Oh, certainly.
Yes, I wanted to find out the orange. What was the orange blocks represent?
So this is the orange, we believe, is property that is owned or has future development opportunity through the community, through the CDC.
Got it. Thank you.
And we see you all in close partnership. So there are various lenses at which to look. There's not just one way to think about developing downtown. And we don't have the answer yet, but we have to make downtown development revitalization work from various perspectives. So one is, where are we likely to get the most net new retail? Because what drives retail today is people who is rooftops, is the ability to walk to it in 5 minutes. That's what that is. It is not folks working anymore, and few of us are going to be working in offices anyway. It's not drive to, it's folks who walk to. So the more folks who live in downtown, the more life there will be on downtown streets. We have to think about where they're coming, and that begins to set up a sort of heart that really emphasizes Opa-locka Boulevard and maybe has particularly at key corners to keep people walking along. We can't assume too much retail, and some retail that supports the walk to Tri-Rail, sort of other key locations we really want to think about. But the more we could focus early on development in this area, the more quickly we will feel the change, because we'll have the compact critical mass is what unlocks opportunity and visible change. Next, please. And again, please jump in with questions. Then, of course, we just must play at the very same time real attention to Opa-locka Boulevard. It is the heart of the community. It always will be. It has been historically. Clearly, what happens here can really bring this end of Opa-locka. I think of this as south, but I'm not confident in that. End of Opa-locka Boulevard sort of to life. Then you have the state buildings. This could be more a matter of streetscape. Clearly, historic City Hall is a project that we're going to be paying attention to. And I know from my own history in Opa-locka has been a long-term aspiration, but a strategy that really brings all this to life may be spawned by the critical mass that one can get here is a second lens. And then clearly along Alibaba Boulevard, there is, if you look at how many parcels subject to possibly have changed where they're concentrated, this gateway boulevard to downtown can really change, particularly in the area sort of closer to the barracks from Tri-Rail and the barracks. I want to point out Tri-Rail is clearly an important generator of housing demand. And we've been doing a lot of transit-oriented development planning recently for the New Jersey Department of Transportation, other folks. And one of the things we have figured out with our mobility consultants is that much of the parking that commuters use can also be used because they tend to use that parking during the day. Residents of new housing use it on weekends and evenings. You don't get one for one. You still have to build some parking for both, but you can reuse an awful lot of parking for both, which then significantly reduces the cost of new housing development. Nationally, just so I know we keep talking about housing, housing is 2/3 of our real estate economy. As we go forward, retail increasingly responds to new housing more than any other lever to get it going. And I think, as we all know, coming out of COVID, there's a lot less certainty about how many folks are going to show up to work in office buildings, because so many of us have discovered we can work remotely. The importance of housing has risen during the COVID period. And again, that's looking in part at larger housing markets and where demographics are going. Is this all? Should I pause for questions or just keep going? Keep going? Okay. Next. And I think.
So, and this one is just because I recognize by the last overlay, there was an awful lot there. So this is a quick pause just to recap and see again where those future development sites likely can occur in the shorter term upcoming years. Now, with that, we need to know what can we actually build. And this is where I'm going to turn it over to Jim, who has spent quite a good amount of time really doing some detailed studying in terms of what can Opa-locka expect to reasonably attract in the upcoming years. And we're going to focus this again more on housing as a key driver. But Jim, if you want to go ahead and just speak for a bit on this.
Yes, thank you, Jared, and thank you, David, for the detailed explanation in terms of the opportunities. And I want to take this time that I have to talk about the reality of being able to take advantage of some of these opportunities that David has listed. Just as a quick introduction and full disclosure, my firm, CRA Community Investment, prepared the original CRA plan for Opa-locka over 10 years ago. And when we did that plan, we had one huge external factor that was influencing the work that we did, and that was the financial crisis. We did the work in 2009, 2010, and certainly creating a CRA during that period of time, especially in Miami-Dade, was really challenging because property values were actually decreasing at that time. And so, as you know, CRAs rely on property value increase. So that externality that external market condition was critical in terms of understanding the future. So a lot of these opportunities that existed 10 years ago, still exists today because Miami-Dade and to a greater degree, Opa-locka took quite a bit of time to actually recover from the great financial crisis of 2008. And in fact, we still see impacts in certain neighborhoods and communities throughout the county and Opa-locka. Having said that, the external context of doing a market analysis today, I thought challenging 10 years ago. It was a piece of cake compared to where it is today. And that is because of the, as we know, and this is a discussion we have constantly, is the pandemic. So we look at market data and data floats in. Some of it's really fresh, some of it's maybe 6 months old, some of it's a year old. And then you look at census data, it's a little bit older from there. But that most of the data that we have right now to base on looking in the future is going to be impacted by the pandemic. And as you know, things shift very, very dramatically. Just in the last week, we've seen the number of cases drop dramatically in the United States and in Florida and Miami-Dade County. Now folks are beginning to talk about a quicker recovery. Everybody's pulling out their crystal ball. So I'm pulling out my crystal ball and going to discuss the market conditions, if you will, to make this happen. And I'm going to go back and forth between pre-pandemic and ignoring the pandemic, as well as looking at the impact of the pandemic. So just quickly going through some of these key points, and I'm certainly open to your questions as I go through this or later. Right now, Miami-Dade County overall, over the last 2-3 years, has had a very strong growth economy pre-pandemic. And South Florida, Miami-Dade County, South Florida, Miami-Dade County, Broward, and Palm Beach has 1/3 of the state's gross domestic product, right? Which means we are clearly the economic driver to the state of Florida, with Miami-Dade just about 16% of total GDP for the state of Florida. The county, as you well know, and the numbers back this up, are a key economic driver, not only for the region and the state, but one of the top metropolitan regions in the country. So we have a very strong growth economy that's taking place. But let's look at the impact from the perspective of the pandemic. There's been some dramatic shifts in terms of employment. Obviously, the number of people of unemployment that are on unemployment aid from the state, as well as businesses that have closed or businesses that have had significant reduction in revenues, particularly in the hospitality and tourism industry. Is there a question or just hearing background noise? Okay, so what we've seen though is that what we're seeing based on the pandemic, right now population growth in the area is going to continue growing at an average of 1.36% a year for the next 5 years. So Miami-Dade, South Florida will continue to grow from a population perspective. And arguably one could say that it's going to continue to grow primarily because of and I'll talk about this in a moment in terms of the housing, but we're seeing net migration. People are still moving to Florida, and even more so because of the pandemic. We have an aging population, folks my age and up and a few years younger. Our demographics segment is growing, but so aren't those under 17 and those between 25 and 39. These are all positive indicators from a global perspective for opportunities in Opa-locka. However, and I'm going to talk about housing, and as David indicated, that's going to be one of our key drivers. But the retail, industrial, and commercial sectors, in terms of relative pandemic impact, there's tremendous turmoil in those sectors. Obviously, retail is struggling. Small businesses are struggling. Those stores that we, every time I take a drive around in my community and say, "Oh, look who closed," oh, wow, they've been there for years. They're no longer in business. And I mean, it's very sad. And I think all of us see that taking place. And also the industrial sectors and commercial and office sectors are suffering as well. However, the housing market continues to be resilient with steady growth in Miami-Dade County. And how we measure that is, as you know, when we transfer properties, there's a documentary stamp tax. So we've seen continuous growth in documentary stamp tax revenues, which indicates that property values and new construction both are contributing to this increase in overall tax revenues. Next slide. So in terms of housing, home ownership is expensive in Miami-Dade County, and it continues to be. And by the year 2025, we're seeing that the average single-family house, detached single-family house in Miami-Dade County will be $450,000. Currently, it is about $400,000, but we see that increase that will continue to take place. There are numerous reasons for that. As people move away from government securities because of the deficit, investors are looking for places to put their money. Stock market is booming. Real estate market is booming. Baseball card collecting is booming. So people are looking for alternatives for investment, and real estate clearly is benefiting and suffering from this hyper investment. So there's strong demand for affordable housing, both rental and home ownership. And affordable housing is obviously a key issue in Miami-Dade County as prices continue to rise, as well as the rental costs continue to rise in Miami-Dade County. Miami-Dade County leads the country in cost-burdened households for rental housing, where they pay more than 30% of gross income for housing. But the continued in-migration, people leaving New York City, you've seen articles in the papers in just the last few weeks about the number of people who are leaving New York and moving to Florida. And folks from New York do not go to the West Coast, they come to Southeast Florida. How's that for a broad general statement? But the data would back us up. So we're going to continue to see this constant investment in terms of housing in Miami-Dade County. Next slide, please. So what's key here is one of the key aspects on the housing market is the rental sector. And so we did some calculating in terms of historic trends, as well as what we're seeing here, and developed a model to try to estimate what does demand look like over the next 6 years, and how much of that demand for rental housing can Opa-locka potentially capture? Is there enough demand for rental housing in Miami-Dade that actually would include Opa-locka being able to take advantage of those opportunities? So the estimated demand for rental apartments, people who can afford rental housing in Miami-Dade, is approximately 33,000 units over the next 6 years. Right now, under construction, there are about 10,000 units. So that gives us a balance of about 23,000 that need to be to achieve market balance over the next 6 years. Miami-Dade needs to develop 23,000 more units. Now, historically, 50% of new rental development has always been done in the city of Miami. All we have to do is look from Opa-locka and look east, and every time you take that view, you see another tower going up. So most of that rental development is in downtown. But I'm beginning to think that we're at a saturation point for downtown Miami, but we're certainly the cost of land, as well as increasing construction costs, developers will begin to look for options. So we adjusted the percentage of new rentals from 70% to 50% in the city of Miami, meaning the balance of Miami-Dade County can help meet the demand for 11,550 units. Then we said, well, what can Opa-locka capture from that? And conservatively, we said Opa-locka can capture 10% of the Miami-Dade balance. So we're looking at, from a market unit perspective, not affordable housing, that over the next 6 years, the demand in Opa-locka, which is a bottom line question, is that we're looking at about 1,115 market units. And then couple that with affordable units, we see another 900 affordable units over the next 6 years. When we talk about affordable, we have to be, and market as well, there's an overlap between the two. And affordable often means people earn under 80% of area median income. But workforce housing also means people earn 60% of area median income to up to 140% of area median income. So don't let the term affordable throw you off and say, well, we don't want more Section 8. It doesn't necessarily mean that. I'm not saying that anybody has said that, but I've heard this often. But affordable and workforce are terms, just be very, very careful when you hear that. Bottom line is rental housing, there are opportunities and there are certainly land disposition opportunities in downtown, as David listed, and this certainly provides the numbers to developers when we have that discussion with them, that there is a market demand. Next slide. And finally, we're looking at industrial, retail, and office sectors. Is that even before the pandemic, the Miami-Dade industrial market continue to weaken. It is not a strong area for Miami-Dade County real estate. However, the pandemic may be a boon, as it is to other parts of the country, to demand for warehouse space. And immediately when I see warehouse space, I just put up and say, well, that's not what we're looking at here for downtown Opa-locka. But warehouse space is often very interested in where they can get the land the cheapest. In Opa-locka, the land values are much less than other parts of the county. So that's kind of a warning that we have to watch out for, is the potential for interest by real estate developers to develop warehouse space on valuable land that could be used for other purposes to enhance the downtown. We're looking at the rates in terms of what the rental rates are for industrial, up to a high of $18.60 square foot and to a low of $9.17 a square foot in the sub-region of Hialeah, Miami Gardens, and Opa-locka. And I'll close with retail and office. Retail within the county submarkets, the combined vacancy rate range from 20% in downtown Miami. Remember, most of those towers that went up in Miami or have gone up include ground floor retail. Much of that has not been rented. And this only will be exacerbated by the pandemic. And this number should be much higher. These numbers are based on pre-pandemic. But what was the surprise was the vacancy rate in Miami Gardens and Opa-locka is the lowest in the county, primarily because there's little retail space, comparatively speaking, in these two communities. So there's an opportunity there in terms of being able to take existing space, upgrade it, and potentially at some point add retail. But as indicated earlier, we need housing as a driver before that retail can take place. And then we looked at market rents for retail space, and as low as $23.60 in Miami Gardens and Opa-locka. And Miami-Dade office, and the latest numbers that we were able to see was Q2. We're getting some fresh numbers at the end of this month, so we'll be updating this for the final market analysis report. But the Q2 of 2020, which was the beginning of the pandemic, we saw the vacancy rate rise by 30 basis points, and there's been a steady increase since then. So the office vacancy rate last year at this time was around 9% in Miami-Dade. That is not a real number in terms of where it is today. And again, the lowest vacancy rate for office space was Miami Gardens and Opa-locka at 1.33%. And let me just close by saying that in terms of a lot of the potential from a market perspective, because of this really, really dramatic moment that we're in from an economic point of view, the pandemic, as with every problem in our lives, and I don't, pardon me for being philosophical, every problem is an opportunity. And the problem of the challenge of the pandemic, there's opportunity. Opportunities in office space in terms of creating co-working spaces that go along with the housing that we've been talking about. People's working conditions are going to change because of the pandemic. There'll be permanent changes as well. The real estate industry is trying to figure this out right now, what those mega trends will be for the future relative to offices, relative to retail. And we'll be closely watching that. And we want to make sure that, and as I finally say, is that the plan that we provide has enough flexibility to address some of the new opportunities that will come about because of the pandemic. Jared, take it away.
Well, I think as the high level you gave a lot, Jim. So thank you.
I'm sorry if I went over.
No, I think it's great. If I'm going to sum it up, and correct me if I'm wrong, then the big and I think very positive news out of this, though, is that it is very realistic to conservatively expect that Opa-locka could draw upwards of 2,000 or support upwards of 2,000 residential units in the upcoming 6+ years. That out of Miami-Dade County, the least amount of available or vacant retail and office space is located in Miami Gardens and Opa-locka, which means that as population grows, there is the greater opportunity then to support the addition of new developed retail. Is that correct?
Boy, I'd love it. I'm going to take you everywhere so you can sum up what I'm trying to say in a long way, winded way. Thank you, Jared.
Yeah, but great news then. Okay, so I think that's terrific. Wonderful overview, and that's one of the things that has been so significant in terms of us now really taking this plan into the next steps. And I think very positive news. One of the other things, though, if we go back to November and December when we talked with you all, and we asked you to help us identify what you believed were the assets and the liabilities as we look towards achieving this development, and what we had hoped would be the numbers that Jim has now just given us, what we hope would be the things that would help us to draw on bringing people into Opa-locka, as well as what some of those challenges were. Now, these, I want to be clear, are the things that you all as a group or individually identified. And you had identified consistently your key assets being City Hall, Tri-Rail, as well as the architecture, and really the Moorish history within the city. And you had identified some of the greater liabilities that the city has historically had is a general perception of the community from outside, that there may have been a time in the past where the city was not as pro-business friendly as what you would have liked. There were past political challenges, and then also that there isn't really a catalyst that exists within Opa-locka for current significant development. I think one or two of you may have mentioned some of the industrial development that has occurred maybe on the western side of downtown or other areas, but there's not been that one thing that sort of sets everything on fire and starts to draw other development. So I'm glad to pause here if we want to, but also we're going to want to come back to this if you think on it in, is this all? Are there other things since we've talked, or things that have evolved now over the last 2 and 3 months since we had those initial conversations that you identify as either new assets for us to look at in terms of downtown, or new liabilities that may have come? So unless anyone has anything to pause here on, we can ask you to think on that and come back to it, and I'll keep going.
Jared, through the chair, if I may. As far as this is Board Member Davis speaking. As far as assets are concerned, one entity that I would add is Amazon. As you know, Amazon came in a few years ago and significantly made a positive impact on our tax base, significantly increasing our revenue. So I would definitely, although it's not city owned, is on private property, and we really don't have any direct ties to the property. I would like to, put that as an option, I guess, for an asset.
I'm going to ask a question, and you may not know the answer to this. Of course, a large investment increases the tax base. Has there been any determination? Has that impacted housing? Has that been an employment for Opa-locka residents? Has there been any growth as a result of that, or are these folks that are coming in, or what has that impact been beyond the tax base? And that's a big question that you may not know. I'm just curious if anyone does know that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think myself and board member Pygott as well, who has been, just trying to get a handle on exactly what those numbers are, how many of our residents actually work or receive employment through that opportunity. And that final number has yet to be realized. We do have a lump sum of individuals that, and I guess it's a rough estimate, that have gained employment. But again, that data is isolated by zip code. So it's really much, it's a part of a much larger group than, within our city limits. So.
Good. Good.
Yeah.
Very, very true, Board Member Davis. We've been asking for that detailed data, but it's based upon zip code at the moment. But the impact to the tax base has been at least $1.6 million to our tax base, and it also has spurred the investment in our industrial area. So over the past year or two, you will see a few more projects developing distribution centers in the city of Opa-locka. So I would like to add, yes, Amazon as an asset, and also the Opa-locka's location. One of the reasons why Amazon chose Opa-locka and why we have a lot of trucking and logistical companies is because it's the epicenter of, I would say, South Florida, because of the intersection of I-75, I-95, the Gratney, 826, the Turnpike. You can get to all of those expressways within 3 to 5 minutes from anywhere within the city. And that's a huge asset that I think it's overlooked. Investors are starting to see that, but that's a big deal. To be able to get to 2 international airports, the Miami and Fort Lauderdale, within 20 minutes. We have our own executive airport, which is the executive airport for South Florida. Those are also major assets to the city that we need to start leveraging much more. We have not leveraged the airport properties and that location as much as possible. I think that is something that we need to look into. And also, I just wanted to give kudos to Jared, because that was an excellent presentation and assessment of South Florida, Opa-locka, and our environment. So much respect for taking the time to really give us this deep dive and understanding of what's the value of our city and putting it in the context of the South Florida market. Thank you very much.
I think, and you touch on something good, and Jim, you are an impressive fellow there. You touch on something good there too, and it is that other industrial, but also, Corey and I have been talking on this and working on this. It's more those impacts beyond, or those assets beyond downtown, and it's the innovation district, to the universities that are in close proximity, and future housing there. And there's a tremendous amount that is surrounding Opa-locka that, as downtown starts to get its momentum going, that really is a draw in that whole area. So I think really great stuff. Chris, thank you for bringing that up. And does anyone else have anything to add to an ask for liability before we flip into the next slide? Okay, so the last one. Yes.
Can I bring up, because I'm not the one he was really asking, but I can answer anyway. So one of the things that I have found really interesting about, and I go back yet again to the housing market, and there's an if attached to this, is that, and I'm going to be just very little bit blunt here, that for many decades, how should I say it, diversity was not a plus in the housing market. That has changed for a lot of folks. But in order to draw benefit and make diversity an asset in the housing market, it's an asset in all kinds of other ways, that diversity needs to be visible in storefronts along Opa-locka Boulevard, in the restaurants, in the business development. So if we can really, one of the, I think both assets and challenges, the asset is that diversity, which does draw a lot of folks these days who it didn't used to, but it does today. It's to bring it to life along Opa-locka Boulevard and the cross street, so that it can be the asset that it has the potential to be.
Excellent. So I'm going to go into the next slide, and I think I can start on this. David, did you want to do this, or do you want me to do this?
Why don't you go ahead and I'll add in. How's that?
So we sort of expanded on the assets and liabilities and looked more from our lens on what are some of the greater opportunities and then some of the challenges that we have to look at realistically as we move forward. So as Jim really pointed out, we've got some tremendous opportunity in the future housing demand in Miami-Dade County as well as Opa-locka, and as we've just pointed out too, location-wise, there's really some huge draw there. We also know that there are some really great development sites in terrific locations, as we were looking at those earlier maps in the downtown area. And it's not just the number of them, but it is that size and the fact that they're all contiguous that we can really envision that future downtown neighborhood of a good density. We've got the transit opportunity. As David mentioned, there is a change in face and mobility and how we are all going to interact in the upcoming years. So there's really a good baseline to start from. The other thing is that there are existing entrepreneurs within Opa-locka. You've got quite a number there. We've talked about this as something that it's not only an asset today, but it's something that you all want to nurture. And as I've shared with Corey and others, and maybe with you, and I used to run a downtown business district, and I will say out of 300 businesses, I was really pleased that we only had 2 chains. Every other one was a local business, and that's what brings it to life. And so that is probably one of your greatest assets. The other thing, and I guess it's what I was just mentioning earlier, it's your assets beyond downtown, the assets beyond the city. There is a lot around Opa-locka in general, and beyond even its transportation network, that is really tremendous. And I think that's an opportunity for us to really expand on a couple of the challenges. And David, can you take the low market rents? Because I think you're going to say that one better than I can, and then I can jump in.
Okay, I'm going to say people aren't spending enough money to rent, but no. So rents are probably not high enough. We're going to be looking a lot of this next couple of months, the next phase out. But if you take, frankly, these 3 challenges and roll them into one, this is Opa-locka is going to be about public-private partnership and really effective public-private partnership. Rents are probably not going to support development. Even if they could support, the most vanilla development, and for instance, affordable housing rents together with, the clear subsidies you know how to get, that isn't necessarily what you want to get. Suppose you did want to create a entrepreneurship center, a place that trained folks for entry into knowledge, innovation industries, get that into the first floor for an area that couldn't support retail with 5 floors of housing above. The 5 floors of housing would drive the project, but it's going to take public investment to get that public benefit you want on the first floor. It may even take public investment to get the 5 floors of housing above. We're pretty confident that will pay off, but we're going to take responsibility in the next phase of this work for really looking at what the in broad form, sort of the pro formas look like for this development, what the gaps are, and recommendations for how you might fill those, tax increment financing, et cetera, probably the tools you have, and really what it would cost to get what. And that being able to do that well and right will be much of the art of translating the opportunities attaching the opportunities that Jim has talked about to the available sites that Jared and I have talked about. Is this making sense to folks? We don't have those answers yet, but boy, do we know we need to get them.
Yes.
And another is to start talking that we know there are some, or we understand there are some willing sellers. That of course depends on who's buying and for how much, but to really start working with, for example, the 3 owners who together own what we've been calling the barracks properties, et cetera, because there's a whole new neighborhood or not, depending on whether you can really get the critical mass of development going, if that makes sense. Now, frankly, each of those sites is worth more to its current owner if they can all be redeveloped than if not, if you see what I'm saying. The three together is worth 5, 3 alone are worth 2, if you see what I'm saying, in terms of the potential value of that land. Where do we go next, please?
No, and I think what we'll do is we'll probably pause here for a minute, David, if you're okay.
Oh, sure.
Because the slide and what we're going to get to is really just the next steps, which is
Okay.
more informative for you, so you all kind of know what we're going through. I feel like we probably put a lot in front of you all tonight in terms of where the plan is as a baseline. But and our purpose in doing this is really to make sure we're all at the same level. So as we go through now these much more detailed aspects of it as it comes in towards those recommendations, and what are those steps, and what is the contribution going to have to be, and how are the ways that we do this, and what is that timeline that not only are we all understanding it, but you can support it. Because as I had said, once this plan is done, it's really going to be up to you as a CRA board and a city council and staff to implement this. So with that, I'm going to pause for a minute, unless Jim or David have anything else to add, and I want to open it up and listen to questions or thoughts from both the board and staff, or anyone else that wants to interject some comments.
Jared, I had a comment, and James Karras, I really appreciate that breakdown of the analysis and where Opa-locka sits in the general market when it comes to Miami-Dade County. If you could explain a little bit more, and I know this has been something that's been being discussed in numerous communities throughout Miami-Dade County, the difference between affordable housing and workforce housing, because I don't think a lot of people really understand the difference between the two. Matter of fact, in some communities, if you say affordable housing, they automatically have a knee-jerk reaction to say that's not what we want to have. But if you say workforce housing, maybe it has a little bit more of a pleasing placement to it. But kind of give us, what the actual differences are between those two types of housing.
Sure, and I'm going to focus. Thank you for asking the question. I think it's an important one, that we all use language together, that we focus on the real meaning of each one. And there's a lot of overlap between affordable workforce housing. And I think, Mr. Gay, you referenced that workforce housing has become in other words, a much more polite way of trying to remove the stigma of affordable housing. We all want to live in affordable housing. We want a place that we can afford. That's a very simple market dynamic. But from a governmental perspective, particularly federal and state, which have much of the housing resources, and through the county, affordable is typically targeted to people that earn less than 80% of area median income. So I believe the area, I'm not going to try to pull numbers. Let's just say the area median income for Miami-Dade County is $50,000. So 80% of 50,000 is 40,000. So you would be eligible for affordable housing. Now, what makes a housing affordable to someone earning 40,000? Well, you're not supposed to spend, and this has been a over 60-year federal guideline, more than 30% of your gross income on housing. So that household that's making 40,000, they shouldn't be spending more than $12,000 a year for housing costs. So tell me in Miami-Dade County where you can find a studio or a 1-bedroom, never mind 2 or 3 bedrooms, for $1,000 a month. It doesn't exist. That's why Miami-Dade leads the country in terms of people that are cost burdened. They're spending more than 30% of their gross income. So affordable housing is typically targeted to people earning less than 80% of area median income. The number one tool to develop affordable housing, rental housing, is low-income housing tax credits. So the project that you have done downtown by the CDC and related, the senior housing, that is low-income housing tax credits. It means it's the way it's financed. And their rule is they can't have anybody earning more than 60% of area median income, because that's the financing rule. Now, very quickly, workforce housing. I think it's kind of been a political term to create much more comfort in accepting affordable housing. Workforce housing goes up to 100, and in Miami-Dade, in South Florida, up to 140% of area median income. So there will be many that will say, hey, there's a need for folks earning 100%, 120, 140%. In this case, up to 70,000 if the median income's to 50,000. Folks, they need affordable housing as well. So workforce is typically up to 140, but I would argue that it also could be somebody earning 60% of area median income, because if you're a housekeeper on in a hotel in Miami Beach, you're going to be in the workforce, but you're also in the lower end of affordable or income range of affordability. That's a lot of stuff and a long way of describing it, but affordable workforce is great overlap between the two. But think of workforce that typically targets higher income individuals, and affordable housing typically targets people lower income, not necessarily low income, not necessarily homeless or extremely low income, people below 80%. Workforce is typically 60 to 140%.
So there's a 20% overlap there, correct, Jim? A 20% between the 60 and the 80% of the area median income is both affordable and workforce. Is that correct?
For working purposes, absolutely correct. And again, somebody could be earning 30% of AMI and be part of the workforce. But from a programmatic point of view, typically government agencies look at more in the 100 to 140% of AMI of workforce. But remember, almost all of our government incentives, federal and state, and those implemented by local government, are targeted to affordable housing. All right. Your CRA incentives do not have to go for affordable housing. They can go for any housing. You have control over that on your own. I'm pretty sure the county would like to see you do some affordable with any incentives that you offer. But overall, your CRA incentives could go for workforce or market rate housing.
Just as a quick postscript, I'll point out, and this is going to be a little bit direct here, that a lot of people who we would broadly consider to be middle class cannot afford market rate housing. And there is a profound need. And a lot of these folks are older and need this housing. A lot of them are younger and on their way up, and they're part of the labor supply that attracts jobs and investment.
And that kind of leads me to my next question. And either David or James, you could probably speak to this. When you spoke about the next 10 to 20 years and what the trends may be as it relates to who the housing market is going to be geared toward. And you spoke about the fact that, most of the housing market is probably over the next 10, 20 years going to be looking at singles.
And couples.
Going to be looking at couples with no kids. And, when I hear that, I'm like, well, does our community as it exists right now play into those particular scenarios? And I can easily say that it doesn't.
Yep.
And it seems as if there may be, with your crystal balls, you're anticipating some type of a paradigm shift over the next generation, to basically look at what type of housing products should be taken in consideration as we look at redeveloping our downtown. I know for a fact that most downtown communities, rental properties are pretty much the highest in demand.
Mm-hmm.
Don't know if condo or townhomes will factor into that as a product that could be considered for home ownership. I know in the past that Opa-locka has looked at home ownership as one of the things that it wanted to move forward with. But even within, some of the simple analysis that me and my staff have done, we just basically look within the downtown area and we just look at the tax rolls. And if your property did not have homestead exemption, there's a very good assumption that you were not a homeowner and that chances are that property was being rented out.
Mhm.
And easily we concluded just clicking on all the properties through the Miami-Dade property appraisers, we probably came up with a number that close to 40 to 45% of the single family homes within the downtown core or close to the downtown core are being rented out.
Yeah.
And then you add whatever else that is part of the overall rental market.
Yeah.
So how does the future planning of this downtown master plan play into what we think will be the future trends, but at the same time, will there be an opportunity to create a housing market geared toward families or a housing market geared toward home ownership?
Jim, do you mind if I jump in?
I know that was a real long question, but
okay, you even
No, it's
provided
pretty
some
clear.
answer. But Jim, do you mind if I jump in first, or do you?
I prefer that you do. Thank you.
So markets are markets. They're not moral judgments or values or goals or principles. They're a tool to work with. And what the market data is telling us broadly, but this is true of every region I have yet seen, is that the large majority of net new demand is not going to be for single family houses, and it's not going to be for family housing. It's going to be for buildings that in areas that are multifamily housing, maybe townhouses, et cetera, in areas that are walkable, amenitized, great places that are rich in community. We say coffee, beer, and retail, but we're really talking about places that give you a sense of community. And that frankly are diverse, and where that diversity really enriches the choices people have to where they can eat and hang out, et cetera. So one advantage, this can be for sale or for rental. One advantage of rental early on is you can fill rental housing about 10 times faster than you can fill for sale housing. So you could build 100 units downtown and rent it in 8 months or sell it out over 4 years. You see what I'm saying? And that 8 months means you get the impact right away. So rental housing generally, and I think should lead, and then when the market becomes more established, begin to look at ownership housing. Does that make sense? Years ago, it's not so true today, people also, I don't know, looked down on rental housing as not housing of choice, as housing that was last resort, that poor people sought out. That's gone. First of all, there are lots of well-paid millennials who can't afford a down payment and rent, but there are lots of folks who are perfectly, or who choose renting over ownership because it gives them the amenity and lifestyle they're looking for. And one of the changes, to come back to the Jim has said, is that as more and more folks work remotely, if they don't have kids, they are much more interested than their peers who go to the office in living in a place that's rich in amenity, in an apartment, for example, because they don't have that community at work. And so one of the schools of thought is that the pandemic will increase the number of folks who are working remotely. And since a great many of them have kids, be a further boost to, for instance, a great new neighborhood that replaces the barracks, or housing on that parking lot, state parking lot that's just got to get redeveloped, or next to Tri-Rail. Is this answering your question sufficiently?
It is.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. And this is, when we're out talking to suburbs, for example, one of the concerns they have is there's not going to be enough demand for their single family housing, because there are lots of families who moved in when they have kids, The kids are grown up, they're moving out, and there's a much smaller market to sell to. So they're worried about prices dropping. One thing that keeps suburban single family housing prices up is a lively downtown that people can walk to. So it works for both market, works for existing residents as well as new residents. I hope that makes sense. So.
Jim, did you want to add into that?
I just want to quickly kind of provide a side comment to this, because as a CRA board and also as an elected body as a city, you have a concern about the economic future and the livability, if you will, of downtown Opa-locka, but you also have concern about housing needs of the residents of Opa-locka, right? And defining those, our job is to work on the downtown vision and the downtown plan. To the extent that you want to have affordable housing included to help meet the needs of folks that live in Opa-locka, but as part of that plan, that's the type of direction I think that we would welcome and certainly need to understand, because it's a fine balancing act, because it's, as you can tell, that it would be very easy to attract low income, not very easy, but to attract low income housing tax credit developments targeting people under 60% of area median income to downtown. But is that the downtown you want for the future? And based on what we're hearing is that you want to have a more dynamic, more diverse, that driven by retail, driven by other activities. And quite frankly, if it's everybody that is earning 40 to 50 to 60% of area median income, there's not much left after paying rent and food and healthcare for other activities of buying a $3 latte at Starbucks, if you will. So, you know, and I don't know what lattes cost. I drink my coffee black, so I think it's more than that. But my point being is that there is a fine balance here, and you're going to hear it probably from citizens as well, and say, "Hey, we need housing for us," and you're looking at a much more robust downtown. I'm an affordable housing advocate and have been my whole career, but at the same time, I understand, or at least on the pathway to understanding downtown Opa-locka and what you're looking to do. It's a fine balance.
And I think the other piece to that, you know, I appreciate your answer on that. I think the other piece to that, that maybe some of the board members are looking for, and I know a few of them have expressed this concern, is that we want Opa-locka to be known more than just an industrial community or a community of logistics and trucking and shipping and warehouses. We want it to be more, you know, of a destination for other types of activities. And as you speak about those amenities, having those amenities actually helps to create the quality of life that I think all the residents and even a majority of the people who work in Opa-locka could learn to appreciate more. So it's creating that delicate balance is very important. But we want to be able to move from just being a place where trucks pass through and more of creating a sense of a destination, so that people will want to live within the community and have those particular amenities and to achieve the quality of life that we see occurring in other nearby communities.
Can I add, Jared, does anybody else want to jump in? Because I don't want to interrupt, but I have a follow-up comment. So just to add another note of opportunity, but also a little imperative to what you and Jim were just saying. On the opportunity side, one of the really, the other side of these amenities, this word we keep using, are entrepreneurs. You know, when Jared talked about a downtown that only had 2 franchises, that's a real plus in the housing market to move to a place with unique retailers. That's sought after. Mm-hmm. You do have an entrepreneurial community. You know, the folks, the more that we can subsidize ground floor rents to help start new businesses, because we've got 5 floors of housing above and they've really made the project a go, the more we're unlocking the unique amenity that will make Opa-locka a destination. You know, you don't need what everybody else has. Is this fair? The other side of this, I have to say, is I've sat in lots of council meetings and board of alderman meetings, listening to one homeowner after another stand up and say, I am now on a fixed income. I cannot afford to have my real estate taxes raised. Therefore, I oppose that new park. I oppose that new school. I oppose that new community center that are really important. And more than 50% of US population growth the next 20 years is also going to be over 65. And it's even more so when you get out of urban cores. So it's really important to create a downtown that's worth more, that's more of a fiscal resource, so that you don't have to depend as much on an aging homeowner base. Is that fair?
Makes sense.
Okay.
Okay. I don't know if any of the other board members may have had some questions.
And please jump in if you do. I think we'll go into our next steps afterwards, but I'd love it if there's other questions, comments, that this is the time.
Through the chair, to Jared, or the panel in general, I have a few questions. I heard you guys kind of mention, I guess, the new affordable housing model, or what the new housing model will be for the city. You know, as a young individual that, you know, moved away, went to college, to live in another location for a few years, and ultimately returned back to my community, not necessarily due to affordable housing opportunities or housing affordability. What, I guess, looking forward, what is that new model of housing for people like me, right? Like, so we talk about brain drain, and we talk about, you know, building a community and attracting, you know, whatever the new, you know, the new face of housing is going to look like, which is mostly single families and, you know, unions without children necessarily. So ultimately our outdated single family, you know, model of housing, which I also reside in a single family home with no kids. But, you know, what is that model? I guess, what is the future of housing? Because I really didn't hear, you know, I guess a straight answer. And I know that neighboring municipalities like Miami Gardens and some others are really doing some innovative things with container homes, which are extremely popular amongst younger demographics, and could, in my opinion, potentially spur growth in the city. So I just was wondering if you guys were thinking along those lines and looking at some of those opportunities to potentially move us in the right direction.
Jared, did you want to
Well,
answer, or do you want?
I don't mind. I'll give a first answer, but David, I suspect you would give a more thorough answer. I think the short, as it relates specific to the downtown, is that, you know, you need to have the density within the downtown area to support the vision of the retail shops and the coffee shop and the downtown activities and the walkability. And I think from what David has said and what we're seeing elsewhere, you know, that future development is going to be some type of mixed use, you know, multi-family building. It will be larger buildings, many stories, multiple stories, of some type of housing unit that may be that 600 or 700 square feet, up to whatever it is that you desire. I think a lot of that, and I don't know that we're the same age, but let's say we're in that 10-year ballpark of the same age. A lot of it is going to be coming to what can we afford, right? I may love that single family home, but I can't afford a single family home in South Florida. So it's going to be that multifamily unit. And, you know, what my budget says will be then guiding on which building and what amenities do I like. So I think that's the short of it. For downtown, it is going to be that mixed use or that multifamily many-story building of some type of apartment or for sale apartment units at some point. David, is that fair in terms of downtown? And do you have anything to add on for the
Well,
future?
I'll just sort of elaborate a little bit. So it's the most of financially, well, things like container housing, we will look at. That's a unique and really interesting idea. And it is taking, it's also a great way to start some really low cost startup retail. Just put a container in there, get a business going. So you've seen like in Memphis and other places, but back to the housing for a second. The most affordable thing to develop is 2 floors of concrete with 3 to 5 floors of stick built above that housing. So now that can look like all kinds of different things. And I think design really does matter. And making sure having design review and design guidelines really makes a difference. Frankly, among other things, it causes developers to bring in better architects because they know they've got to pass a design review panel. When you say you want innovation, if that's what you want, you're more likely to get it in terms of design. But what really brings downtown to life is what happens on those first 2 floors. Clearly where you can get retail and where you can get retail that pays enough rent to pay for the cost, that's just great. But in many cases, it's really worth investing in, and this is the public sector doing it, if you can't get any retail rent, put in artists' work cell spaces, which can then draw 5,000 people on a Friday night to come tour through it, who then go eat in restaurants. If you can get a nonprofit who might pay you some rent, but not enough, but to really train folks and create an entrepreneurship center, that's what brings downtown to life. So it's the design above and the activity on the first 2 floors. Now that's really stereotyping those buildings, but that's what the market's looking for. And Jared, well, some of you and the 2 of you may prefer both single family houses or want one without kids. The bulk of that market doesn't, because you have to take care of those places, as you, sir, probably know. And they'd rather go downstairs and like me and drink a latte or something. So is that fair?
Yes, thank you. My other question is also related to, I guess, future development and the local economy. So as you know, as we grow and expand and begin to develop our city, we also must simultaneously look at the local economy and creating jobs and things that drive those factors as well. I guess given the proposed plan, what measures are we putting in place, I guess, to one, leverage the opportunities that are being presented as far as development and growth in our community is concerned, with balancing, creating jobs, increasing the local economy, including the tax base and other drivers to make our community more flourishing. So like what in the plan are we doing to address those issues?
Well, that's a big question. The easy thing to do would be to punt it to Jim or to David, but I think the fair answer to that is that more of that will come. We're simply not there. I think at this point, we're realizing what downtown can realistically support in terms of housing, which, as we've said before and we'll say many times, is going to be your significant driver of what goes forward. Our focus, of course, is going to be on the downtown, and the goal then is to create a plan that can welcome support and find the tools in this plan for you as a city to help where you need to incentivize or create those small entrepreneur opportunities, retail and the office spaces and whatnot that will support the activation of downtown. I don't know that we're necessarily looking in this in terms of the city's overall economic development plan. It is really more on the downtown plan. But I think it's fair to say, and Jim or David, please correct me if I'm wrong or add in, that we're just not at that place yet to really tell you, well, these are the tools that are going to get you there and this is what it will return, right? David, is that fair?
I'll add a postscript. Yeah, it's totally fair, but I'll add a quick postscript. So how do I say this? If you think about what Jim said for about 4 seconds, you begin to realize that getting a job does not necessarily get you the income you need anymore for most people, for a great many people. There's something like 40% of US jobs are not much above poverty level right now. We worked in a neighborhood in New Orleans where 90% of the folks were employed and 50% of the households were in poverty. Jobs didn't do it. It's training for jobs that really have a future that makes a difference. So I'm really an advocate of finding partnerships to really, 90% of the net new jobs over the next 20 years are going to require some higher education, not necessarily 4 years. And there are a lot of folks who don't have that right now, who need access to it. And they need it, if they can get it in their community, all the better. So that's one thing we want to think about, is creating that space and letting housing drive the development that gives you an opportunity to bring the institutions in who offer that. The other side is, which I forgot to say a minute ago, one of the things that's been very intriguing is to look at, when I mentioned those 2 concrete floors with 5 floors of frame above, the first floor is retail or some active use. The second floor can often be shared office or loft-like, cheap office space to give entrepreneurs a chance to get started downtown. And there are, most job creation in this country does not come from big businesses, it comes from startups. So if you can get a couple startups to succeed downtown, over the longer term, that could be the most valuable way to create jobs, other than the kinds of jobs you'll get, in your industrial park. But the training for people for jobs, there can be a big gap between the availability. When we were working in New Orleans, we discovered that if you did not have a high school education, I've forgotten, there were many more of you than there were available jobs. If you had 2 years of higher education, there were many more jobs than there were you. So if you can get people across that span, that can be the most effective thing you can do around job creation. Is that making sense? Is that fair?
I just wanted to add something very, very quickly. And part of the context for Miami-Dade County, another number one ranking for Miami-Dade County and South Florida is that we lead the country in the establishment of small businesses. All right. So we are a very entrepreneurial region. Now, that's the good news. The bad news is when those businesses go to the next stage, which is called early growth stage, they begin to add employees, they have a stronger revenue stream. We drop from number 1 of the top 50 metropolitan areas in the country to number 47 out of 50, right? So there's again, based on that challenge, there's an opportunity to help people who start businesses. And when we look at, particularly from a minority perspective, African Americans in particular, that over 90% of the small businesses owned by African Americans in Miami-Dade County are sole proprietors. They are those micro businesses. So there's a need. Those businesses need help in a variety of ways: capital, marketing, legal, accounting, etc. But there's an opportunity, and that opportunity is, how can we use downtown as a innovation space? How can we use downtown as a kind of a virtual and bricks and mortar incubator to recognize the folks that live in the community and the region in terms of what they do and help them grow their businesses? So all of this ties together very nicely.
Absolutely. Thank you all for your responses. So if I'm hearing you correctly, we need to create space for training opportunities to create jobs. With Amazon being right there in our backyard, it presents, I believe, one of the most greatest opportunities, being that they have 21st century technology that is being used every day in their workforce. So definitely figuring that piece out and being able to bridge the gap to create more work opportunities for our residents. Also, as it relates to, I guess, how to start a business. As you know, Opa-locka, we have actually a lot of small business enterprises, and even our own CDFI that actually is located in the downtown area that works with many of our local businesses, not only in the city of Opa-locka, but in the greater North Miami-Dade community. And it's a separate entity. It's not affiliated with the city. It's associated with a nonprofit, but definitely using that as a resource as we begin to build and develop our downtown area. Also, as it relates to, I guess, the density and create more opportunities such as mixed use and that sort of thing. As you know, we had an overhaul of our zoning code a few years back, which significantly changed the type of development, right, we would want to see in our city. So Town Center 1, which is an elderly housing complex within our community, is actually, I think it was one of the first phases of that zoning, what was included in the phase of that zoning change. So it's actually one of the tallest buildings in our city. So we have made strides, and I guess as we continue to make strides, there'll be more opportunities. So thank you.
One thing I wanted to point out, we're on a development team in Boston, and I know Boston has lots of financial resources that Opa-locka doesn't have. But this is a mixed use development, mixed income that is targeted for Roxbury, which, as you may know, is the heart of our African-American community. And it was very interesting. The city owns this site, and their request for proposals said, we strongly encourage arts, culture, retail, job training, all these things that we're talking about. And then it said, we recognize this means we may have to invest more in your development. Now, Boston has resources Opa-locka might not have, but it would be, I think, really worth our time with you figuring out if there are things you want that don't pencil out, but they're worth it for Opa-locka, and if there's a way to afford to send the message to the development community, we'll help you create that. That then also helps you attract the kinds of developers who are more adventurous and interested in doing complex and interesting projects. So something to think about.
No, definitely thank you for that. Because I mean, even in my thought process, when we think about creating jobs locally, is always how can we incentivize, the big guys, right? The large companies that come into our city that are looking for development opportunities, and how can we get them to help our workforce. And really, with the information you just presented is quite, adverse to that by, saying that our small business owners are really, the ones who are driving the workforce and creating the jobs in our local economy. So hearing that as a leader, my position is, how can we pour more into those small business owners? How can we create more opportunities to get those startups off the ground and impacting and doing business in our communities? So I'll be here for the long haul. So I'll be interested to see the final outcome of the downtown development plan, and it's been great working with you all.
Well, we want to make it fast so we can all see it too. All right.
And I thank you for bringing this information to light. One thing that we have not spoken about, and maybe this will be something that we'll consider as part of the next step. In a lot of cases, our downtown master plan, we may be looking at it from, we may be looking at it from a standpoint of how it can be a resource or a tool to spur opportunities for residents that are here, as well as for potential new residents or businesses to come into the community. One thing that I've noticed with certain particular parts of a master plan is that while it does speak to those particular philosophical things and ideologies, at the end of the day, to attract a developer, it gives a roadmap as to what the city is envisioned to look like, or the downtown is envisioned to look like
Absolutely.
physically. Because I mean, a lot of the things that we discussed thus far, those are things that are more of a policy or an objective or a goal or ideal that comes out of our, comprehensive master plan overall. But to kind of make our downtown master plan different, we need to look at it also with those particular things in mind, but from a physical perspective to say, this is what our downtown is going to look like. These are the buildings that are going to be placed. This is where this type of housing will occur, or this type of mixed use. Will we have that within this particular document? Because that's kind of the selling piece to entice those developers to say, hey, Opa-locka has this nice slick brochure that says they're building a new downtown and I want to be a part of it. So will we be able to see something along those particular lines as well? And I may be getting a little bit ahead because I know that we're looking at doing some type of a downtown forum probably within the next 30 to 45 days. But I'm hoping that we will look at that particular aspect of the master plan as well.
Yes, you absolutely will, and we recognize the importance of that. And so, and I feel like David wants to say something too, but we do see that value, and that is understood to be a part of this, and that will be included as the plan further develops once we have the little bit greater level of refinement. And some of the things, and I know we haven't really talked a lot about this today, but we'll go into more as we start to look at these densities and where these buildings go. The next is we've already done our conditional, or so far our parking analysis and some of that data and what those street cross sections looked like and where are we getting in bike lanes and sidewalks and on-street parking, and all of those things will now start to come out of this. And once we have those pieces together, then we get a better picture of what does that downtown look like, right? And from there, then we'll be able to go into that place where, where I hate to use this phrase, but we paint that picture of what that tool is that you're going to sell and show developers as that vision. Right. David, do you want to add something to that? I know you do.
Gregory, what you're talking about is what we love to do, but we feel guilty if we do it before we've built the right foundation. And so with the foundation in place, we certainly don't want to do it before we know what the market is, and that we know that the public-private partnership tools will be there to actually create what we draw. That said, Jared and I think we're just talking about anew, weren't we? We know just in-house who we would like to start working on the visual aspect of this. So,
okay, great.
Hi, good evening. I had a quick question. This is Board Member Williams.
Yes, go right ahead.
Okay. So it's a two-part. I wanted to know, when we talk about the previous slides, we discuss the market in terms of home ownership versus rentals. Thinking about homeowners, and we know we do have a influx of people buying homes in Opa-locka, but the question becomes, how much discretionary funds do those homeowners then have to be able to want to spend that extra cash that they may have on hand when it comes to these the businesses in the downtown master plan? Looking at I guess for me the question would be, how then do we have those discussions with homeowners and also renters, but specifically the homeowners, to know what are you attracted to, what type of businesses that you would want to spend your money to. Would it be a hair salon? Would it be, I know for Opa-locka, a coffee shop with a $10 cup of coffee may not be feasible in Opa-locka, but maybe it's a cafe con leche or something to that term. So how then do we have those discussions, or not? I can't say how, but I think where we need to move is having those discussions with residents to see, what are you attracted to? What will you spend your extra discretionary money on and funds in order to, make sure that these businesses are viable? And second, also looking at, we talked about startups, but also looking at pop-ups. So maybe doing some quick pop-up shops to see and get a feel of who or what could be a viable business, but not necessarily committing to a long-term contract, but having that specific pop-up shops. And I'm only saying that because just down the street from me, one of the residents put out a table, had baskets of beautiful flowers, and right in front of her house, and there was a line, and she made right there, for Valentine's, beautiful arrangements. And I went, wow, like she just did a pop-up shop in the front of her house, and she didn't even know it. So, and I was just thinking, for the board, those are two things. Let's have those discussions with the homeowners, because we know that, and I'll just say the residents, to have those conversations about what will you spend your discretionary funds on? What do you want to see in your community? Having them vet those specific businesses, and not for us as a board to just tell the community what we think they should have.
So, and I think that was a comment you were generally making to the board.
I think to everyone, anyone that
No, I think it's good. It's a
that's
valid
where
comment.
I'm headed. That's what I'm thinking about. And it's probably not even a question. I just think that we just need to make sure we're, vetting the right businesses for the right for our community.
Well, Board Member Williams, that's an excellent question, and that's one that we have talked about, having some town hall meetings where the residents are also have some input. But we as board members and also we're community people, your ideas that you get from the residents, just like you saw that and you bring it to us, is also an asset. Because, people might talk to you when they might not come to a town hall. They might not come to a meeting. I've been trying to encourage people to get more involved in the CRA's board meeting and, have some input, because we are looking at doing some projects. So I think it's a great idea. And I think we are going to have town hall meetings, but it's also a good idea because you are a board member and a community person, that if you bring those ideas to the board, we know that you're bringing them on behalf of the community as well.
I am about to email Jared an image of a pop-up shop, a pop-up retail little square that Memphis created for a while. Then it went away, but it did its purpose as an example. I think that just doing online surveys are a great way to find out from your full community what they'd like to find downtown. Give them some choices and ask them. It's not. Yeah, the other is to really spend more dollars and have a market study done there are some terrific retail consultants. We could suggest some to you who would be very good at that. But just as a quick start, just get a survey online. And is that fair?
Yes, I think that's a great idea. And again, if I can jump in here, we had talked about when I met with you all right there in the downtown area, we had talked about doing something like that, Board Member Williams, on a Friday afternoon, setting up the streets and letting the vendors come and set up and inviting the community out. And then that would give them a sense also, businesses, a sense also of what the community likes and what they want, because investing in a building and, it's not going to be lucrative to you. So pop-ups, I think, are really good. And that idea that we had, Jared, of, creating that Friday afternoon once a month. I think they do it in North Miami. They have one Friday, they have some music, they have tables and chairs out, and they invite vendors in the community to come out. So I think to start doing something like that to generate some activity in the community will also be helpful.
Yeah, one place, a city you might want to talk to, because they've done a good job of this. The downtown, I mentioned we recently finished a master plan for downtown Memphis. The Downtown Memphis Commission, which is the partnership, the business improvement district and the partnership that helps downtown, is I think really pretty good at launching pop-ups. And they recognize that most of them don't succeed, but enough do, and they can be very successful at certain times of year, basically the things you just said. And if you want, we could we could just give Corian contact information for them, and it might be a very interesting conversation.
Excellent. Well, are there other comments that want to be added? We're glad to stay on. I said we're a little past our time, but we have time if there's things that you want to talk to.
I do have a question, Mr. Jarrett. This is Board Member Taylor. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Please
Okay.
go ahead.
In regards to the affordable housing, I know that you said that in order for the downtown to be thriving and the businesses, the housing rent has to be raised. So I don't want it to look, Opa-locka has a large affordable housing community. So I don't want it to look as if we are pushing affordable housing out, being that where people can't even afford to live in Opa-locka. Like you'll be turning us into a Brickell or a Sunny Isles or something like that. How do we, like Vice Mayor says, let our community know that we're not pushing you all out, but we're just trying to enhance our community?
Well, I think I'll risk and make a comment, and then I'm going to ask Jim to come in and add into it. I want to be very sensitive to this. I don't think anyone here is saying we need to push the rents up or the cost of housing up in Opa-locka. I think the point that Jim is suggesting, or we are saying, I won't even say suggesting, we are saying, is that in order to have the vision of those coffee shops and restaurants and retail establishments, also have to be able to spend money on those. And that takes that balance in the housing mix. And so it is a combination of things. It is not, though, an effort in any way to try to eliminate anyone. Jim, do you want to do a better shot at that than I just did?
Yeah, I'm checking to see if I'm on mute. One, you did a good job, Jared, and I think that I'll go back to what I was referring to earlier. Is one, I think that the guidance is needed from you both as a CRA board as well as a city commission about that balance, and I think we need to hear from you that you're seeking that balance. And I think I've heard it from a number of individual voices, but you're seeking that balance in downtown of affordable workforce and market housing. And that's our assumption in moving forward, is that this is the vision that for downtown Opa-locka, that it'll be a diverse downtown in a number of ways in terms of housing styles and choices, in terms of demographics by race and by income as well. Because diversity is key to you, and part of that diversity is a mix of affordable workforce and market housing.
And just to
Okay.
over answer, but I think it's also, and we have to be very careful in how we speak here. But so what we're not saying is that we want you to push rents up. We are saying the rents aren't high enough to support new development, or we think, we're going to learn more about this, so that you will need to provide some incentives and subsidy partnership dollars to launch these projects. That is important for people to understand the distinction. It's not that we or you, if you adopt a plan, are trying to push up rents. It's you're trying to draw the investment and recognize that it needs higher rents than are currently attainable. Is that fair?
Yeah, I guess it can suffice as an answer. And then my next question is in regards to assets. We talked about assets, and we talked about Commissioner Davis brought up the Amazon, and the mayor brought up the Opa-locka Airport. But are we looking into the actual flea market? And are they willing to actually redevelop that area?
It's not part of the downtown area, is it?
Actually,
I don't think
the flea market area is not in the CRA.
it's not in the CRA. If I may, Board Member Taylor, I think we're a good area for us to think about when we're talking about our rent, the amount of rent that people are paying now in Opa-locka would not, needs to be raised. I don't think we're talking about pushing people out, but I think that we need to look at the landlords and the upkeep of the properties that are within the CRA area. They probably are charging less rent because they're not keeping the apartments up. They're not painting. They don't have enough garbage. If you look down Sherazard, the garbage is always running over because the landlords don't have sufficient garbage containers to accommodate the amount of apartments that they have. So I think that in raising, in looking to pay a little bit more rent, you're going to get a better quality of housing. And that means that the landlords, that there needs to be something to deal with these landlords that don't keep the properties up. And that's why the rent is always so low. They don't invest anyway into the properties, a fresh paint of code and those type of things. So that's what I think, you have to do more to your community to bring it up to a standard to even attract people. Because, when one neighbor starts fixing up their house, then another neighbor starts fixing up their house. And before you know it, the whole block is trying to do something, to beautify that area.
Yes, ma'am, Madam Chair. And I totally agree with you. I just don't want it to appear that we're pushing anybody out. Because we know sometimes a positive thing can give a negative perception in people's minds if it's not explained, which is why I agree with what the Vice Mayor was saying about transparency and explaining. And you talked about the town hall meetings, to letting our Opa-locka know that we're doing this for you. We're not trying to replace you, but we're doing this for you.
And I agree with you. And that's why we have to be the one to tell our story. We have to write the narrative as to what we're doing in our community. And the more we write the narrative in a positive light, then, if I talk to my neighbor, you talk to your neighbor, and that becomes a domino effect. Everybody's saying the great things that are going on in the community, then that will sound out the one or two or three or four people that are always talking negative about Opa-locka. So we have to write our narrative, Board Member Taylor, and I think that this commission that we have is doing, this CRA board, let me not talk about the commission. This CRA board is doing a great job of that. And then as you all do it as commissioners, we're talking about as a CRA board now. I don't want to get that mixed up. But as we do it more as just community people, it would really help the perception, because somewhere on the slide I saw something about the perception that people have about Opa-locka. And when we did the walkthrough with with the consultants, we talked about made in Opa-locka. There are a lot of businesses and shops and people that things are made right here in Opa-locka. I think the Super Bowl t-shirts, I think they were made by one of our vendors here in Opa-locka. So we have a lot of things that we can build off of that would drown out a lot of that negative talk, but we just got to be the ones to build on it.
I just want to, I keep adding postscripts, but I mentioned we're recently finished downtown master plans for Memphis and Birmingham. And I want to say that the larger point about not appearing to develop downtown to force people out or to make it an island of affluence in a city that isn't all affluent was just as important there as it is to you and what you were saying earlier. It's important for every downtown, no matter what the community, to emphasize that redevelopment is for the people who already live there and is about benefiting the entire community. And very importantly, you'll never get a cent of public money if people think it's just being spent on an affluent downtown. Is that making sense? So your concern is broadly shared.
Okay, we have Mr. Strickland from Opa-locka CDC who has his hand up, and then we're going to go ahead and start wrapping up.
All right. So thank you. I just want to make a comment and ask the Stantec team to provide more information on the workforce housing model. As the questions that are coming through, what I'm hearing about diversity of income, maintaining more income opportunities, the programs are there. I don't feel that was, maybe integrate that into your regulatory program as well, because what we're looking at on one of the sites that was displayed tonight is a 200-unit development. And it's very clear to us that workforce housing, as it's funded, is for incomes between $19,000 and $36,000 for individuals. And to answer Commissioner Davis's question, there is also incomes from $36,000 up to $76,000 as individual households. And we would be regulated in that project to provide no more than 50% at those higher incomes. So it's not displacement, it's adding a mixture of both higher and affordable income opportunities, along with workforce. And I also would like to see Stantec answer some of the questions on how the city can provide different incentives related to workforce to achieve, what's been a common thread here of the perception of the community, not catering just to a high end, but, addressing everything. And that's taking place in the city of Miami in T68 zoning. There are plenty of examples here locally, not necessarily in Memphis, that I think can be much more relatable to the board here.
Okay, I see Board Member Paget has his hand up. You want to ask the final question?
Yes, I have a quick question. This has been an amazing discussion and really exciting and motivating. Thank you to Stantec and the team for really putting in some work, and all those of my colleagues for providing those insights. There was a lot of ideas that came up, such as regulating landlords, incentives, creating pop-up shop districts, shutting down streets and zoning regulations, and even putting together an architecture design committee. Will, as a part of this downtown master plan, will Stantec be able to provide policy recommendations and even some legislation from other similar municipalities that can reach those goals? Because I want to make sure we do as our duty as policymakers to have that policy in place to make sure that these ideas actually come to fruition within the city. So can we get that as a part of this downtown master plan?
Yes, and again, I'll ask David to jump in as well, but yes, we have been talking with staff. It's our intent that as we review some of the recent plan changes, as well as some of the language that the staff have been working on now, we will do a review with that and also make recommended additions and or changes in what exists today to help you get to those end goals.
And I just to having been invited here. I think I certainly agree with what Jared said. I also think it would be useful as I'm listening to this discussion to provide you with names of folks that you might want to talk to who have on the ground facing similar challenges, figured out how to make these things work.
Okay.
Okay, Mr. Gay, can I, before you jump in, can I make a comment?
Yes, Madam Chair, you can always have the floor.
Well, thank you. I would like to say to Stantec as well, thank you very much. And also to the board, we know that the hour was growing late, but I think this is well worth the time spent. And we are going to continue to work to make sure that the CRA is making an impact in the community and staying focused on the vision and the goals that we have. And I must say that you all have been a very easy team to work with, especially in getting our input and not making it difficult for us as board members to follow along and to understand. And then you understand us as a community, understand Opa-locka. I think that means a lot because as board member John Taylor said, you know, we have residents that have been here for years and years and they are part of this community and we don't want them to feel like, you know, that the new millenniums, that's not me, the new millenniums are jumping in here to try to, you know, change the community in a way that would take away from their rich heritage. And one thing I want us to remember that although we are a diverse community, Opa-locka is still one of the last predominantly Black African-American communities around. So we don't want to lose focus. We understand diversity, but we don't want to lose focus on those things as well, because when I go to Hialeah, I don't care where I go, I know I'm in Hialeah. You know, when I go in the restaurants, when I go in the shopping malls, they're playing their music, they're enjoying their heritage. So as a community, we are diverse and we welcome diversity, but let's not lose what we have, what we have here in Opa-locka as well as African Americans.
I think one thing, I have to figure out, make sure I don't mess myself up in trying to say this. If you think about the housing demand that Jim talked about as a tool to create the places to bring your living culture to the street, to everybody, that to me is how to look at it. It's not a goal in its own right. It's only worth doing if it accomplishes the things that make a better community for you and the folks who are there.
One last thing, and I promise I'm going to be done. The mayor mentioned, you mentioned some, what did you say? Some art committee or what did you call that? You said the mayor said something about we need to establish some type of art district committee.
Architecture Design Committee. I think he was speaking more or less along the historical fabric of the design of what those future developments will look like. And maybe there needs to be some type of a design committee to review that. In most cases, it would be done through the Planning and Zoning Board to go before the commission, but maybe you as a CRA board would want to commission some type of an architectural review committee for those projects that have been spearheaded from the CRA. And as they go through their review process, you would be one of the initiators to make sure that the project meets those particular criteria.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking in terms of Board Member Paget, that's a great idea, but I would like to see it as part of this board that partners with the city of Opa-locka to bring that into a reality, so that in the CRA quarter, you know, we established that for the CRA quarter, but it's in conjunction with what the city wants as well, but it would establish us as a CRA board, as a CRA quarter.
Yeah, the intent of my comment was really about making sure, because there was a lot of great ideas. Many times we have these great ideas and they kind of fall by the wayside.
Yes.
And I just really want to make sure that Stantec, the planning, the executive director, are taking note of these ideas and putting aside policy recommendations that we can take as a CRA board, as a commission, as a planning and zoning board, and actually make it happen like now. Not wait 10 months, a year, 2 years, like, no, let's make this stuff happen now so that these ideas can manifest and we just don't continue to talk about them. So that was really the point. I want to make sure that someone is noting them and making sure we have policies in place and legislation that can move this stuff forward.
I agree. Great comment. So I know that Mr. Gay is making notes, and also we have Ms. Hall on the line as well. And then also this meeting is being taped, so anything we missed, we can always go back to it. So again, fantastic meeting, fantastic.
Okay, I just like to make a couple of quick announcements. Appreciate the Stantec team taking time out of your schedule to give us this particular presentation. As you can see, it's been well received by everyone. It's definitely an educational process for some. We're learning more and more about how we can make these particular changes and modifications to our community. And we see our downtown area as the crown jewel of the city, and everything else can evolve pretty much around it. So we want to continue to move forward in that particular process. We do have an upcoming CRA board meeting, which was going to be a week from today, next Wednesday. Want to make sure that everyone is on point and ready to be a part of that. And at the suggestion of the chairperson, and because we do have a commission meeting that day, I believe that it might be beneficial for us to meet at the Shabundi Village as in person for that particular meeting. Since the commission is already meeting in person, we can also have our CRA meeting in person. So that would be basically with the commission, with the addition of board member Titus and board member Russell. So if that's okay with everyone, we would definitely move forward in that particular direction. As it relates to the information that was presented as a part of this workshop, staff will be getting a copy of what was presented, and we will forward that information to all of the board members, and we'll make a copy available on the CRA website so that the public can be able to view that information as well.
And we look forward to bringing some of these, a few of these ideas that we talked about on today, Mr. Gay and staff. We're looking forward to bringing some of them next week to the CRA board meeting so that we can move forward and not get stalemated in pushing the things that we want to see done.
We pretty much have an already prepared agenda for next week, but if there are some other things that we can scribe and we can have a discussion about, we would definitely welcome that and be able to further develop it for future CRA meetings.
Okay, we want to move. We don't want to get stuck. We don't want to get stuck in neutral.
Nope, we are in drive and we're going to stay in drive.
Thank you. So with that being said, if there's nothing else, thank everyone for for being here tonight. And we look forward to having in-person meetings starting next week with our social distancing and everything that we need to, to make sure that everyone stays safe. But we want to move to in-person meetings if that's okay. If you can't and you have to be by Zoom, that will be fine. I see Ms. Hall has her hand up. Ms. Hall?
Yes, I just have a question. Thank you, Chair. I have a question for City Attorney. When we advertised the CRA meeting, it was advertised as virtually. So I wanted to know, since we're meeting in person now, how do we go about that? Because the meeting is next virtually.
Can you ask that again? You kind of cut off.
What she wanted to know is that
Okay,
the meeting was advertised virtually in the advertisement, and we want to have it in person. How do we handle that?
You can put out another notice, because the people will be able to attend virtually. That hasn't really changed. It's the board that's going to be at Shabandi, basically.
I don't believe we're gonna have to do anything as far as the advertisement, because that information is as the city attorney has just stated, it's still going to be somewhat of a virtual meeting to the public. It's just that the board is actually going to be all in one place at the same time. So we can discuss this a little bit further offline between the city attorney and staff.
Okay,
thank you.
thank you.
Okay. Again, I'd like to thank everyone for being a part of this. Madam Chair, if you would like to go ahead and close us out, we can consider this meeting.
Okay, we consider this workshop closed. And everyone have a good evening. Be safe.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank
Have a
you.
good night.
Right.
Everyone.
Yes.
Good night.